morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Jan, our president, Jan Bries is here, and many, many festival makers from across Europe, across the world that are joining us for this 1 hour conversation that we are entitling Artists' Words. We have done that before, Tiago. We've never done that with you, so we are very honored to have you here with us. Honored not only because you are the director of the Avignon Festival, and here's a big group of festival makers that are running festivals as well, and they would love to learn how you run the Avignon Festival, and they could tell you how they run their own festivals, be it the Holland Festival, Theater Festival, whatever they are around. It's not for that reason mainly, maybe, but mainly for you as an artist, as a theater director, as one who is now again creating a new work, looking at this world, which is a troubled place. We can say maybe as usual, or maybe exceptionally. So we are very, very happy to have you with us and to make us think with you, with your words, with your reflections that Haris and Tom are going to get out of you somehow in a conversation with you for the next 30, 40 minutes. And then we have around 20 minutes for all of us to come into the conversation and have a talk, have our comments, our reflections to share with you, or our questions that we would like to put to your attention as well. In the meantime, dear friends, don't feel shy to put comments in the chat. We have 2 facilitators, moderators that will follow up the chat here as well. In the meantime, talk to each other in the meantime, but don't forget to listen above all, because this is a listening exercise of the words of Tiago Rodrigues. And I hand over to you, Haris, for a brief introduction and then to start the conversation. Thank you, Tiago, for taking this invitation.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm very happy and honored to have this morning as our guest Tiago Rodrigues, who is one of the most important artistic voices in the world at the moment. You know, he is a playwright, he is a theater director, and he is directing one of the most important artistic events, Festival d'Avignon, one of the most important festivals in the world. Tiago, you are in the very peak, you know, of the cultural and artistic world in Europe and around the world. I saw recently your fantastic show, Hackaba, Non-Hackaba. I had the privilege to see it in Epidaurus, which was a magnificent stage for it. It's a Comédie Française production, and it is a very strong critique of the power, and specifically French government, you know, and its relation to certain problems in the society. Simultaneously, you had the opening of Avignon Festival this year, which was very pronounced artistically and politically, with 2 events. With one event which was it had direct implications with the ongoing elections at that time in France, and at the same time you invited Angelica Lidl for the opening show with her very open, sharp and provoking production. So you are not shy to express what you think about the world, obviously. So the world is very troubling at this moment. Europe is getting more and more dramatic, it seems. America as well, and other places, you know, as we know, from Middle East to Ukraine. What is your artistic, philosophical, and personal position in this moment, and what should we do?
Okay, easy questions. I realize. Good morning, everyone. It's great to meet you, to be able to talk with Haris and Tom and with everyone. I see some familiar faces also in the little windows in my screen. It's great to have the time to share, and I congratulate you on finding the time for these sort of conversations, which I think are essential exactly to be able to find common attempts at an answer to your question. I think I would say that the first thing that we should do is cooperate, share, build collective imagination and attempts at questions and answers. I think working in the cultural field and the artistic field, and especially in the performing arts, theater, dance, performance, music, circus, we're better at asking questions than giving answers. And the challenge is also how to find the better way to ask questions with our artistic gestures and those of others, and how to be together asking these questions, which is also an essential feature of the performing arts, is the human assembly. So I think, we organize meetings where people present their arts to an audience, and questions arise. How to do that? But that's what we do. I mean, that's what we do even I don't think there are easy times in the world, but less difficult times in the world. That's still what we do. I mean, I work on a festival that, as others in the post-war Europe in the 20th century in 1947, and I see Emily there, who directs Holland Festival. We also know that Edinburgh was founded in 47, like Holland Festival and like Festival d'Avignon. And so I also read the mission of Festival d'Avignon as a political, social, citizenship mission of putting people together around the arts so that we can debate in order not to fight, or to fight with ideas in order not to fight physically. So disagree, not in order not to be divided. And I think the arts propose that in the performing arts, living arts, as they say in France, les arts vivants, propose this idea of being together around or in front of a work of art, and experiencing it together collectively as equals, although we will all have different feelings and opinions about this experience. So that difference, individual difference, based upon a common experience as equals, is, I think, a very democratic experience. And the debate that can come out of it is paying homage to the richness of difference and diversity of ways of looking at the world, which is something which is endangered when society is so polarized as it is the case today in Europe and in many continents and in many countries, where there's only two ways, with us or against us, for those and not for those from the other side. And the idea of being able to assume that a plurality of views and interpretations and ideas and readings of what the world is rich, I think is maybe the vulnerability, but also the great treasure of democracy. So in that sense, I would say that a festival is like the intense version of this daily democratic praxis of what as Democrats we could deal with when it comes to the arts. Although the arts don't have to have this function, I believe. They should be free just to express themselves. I'm totally against the idea that you should attribute a role to the artists, but I think we should have a role for festivals, theaters, institutions, the way that society might organize to benefit from the arts, but the arts, they're only part of the human experience. They don't have to prove their social impact or efficiency. Artists just have to be able to work as freely as possible and in the best conditions possible, so that we collectively as a society can organize ways, bridges that can make the larger and most diverse amount of people benefit from what arts can offer us. And I would say, Haris, just to start, when you said you're at the peak of the theater world or something of that kind, I take it as a compliment, but at the same time, I just want to establish that's not the way I see what we do. I don't see it in a vertical way where there's a hierarchy, even of importance. Of course, we know that the world and society works often that way, but I think we have to counter that while being working in what is considered one of the most important festivals in the world. I'm still just working on a festival, as many of us here in this meeting, and with with more common things than things that differ. So I don't see a huge difference between when I started working 25, 26 years ago and the way I operate today. I see differences in tools to work, but the reasons why I do it and also the way I try to do it doesn't differ a lot. And of course, in my case, and I don't think it's the obligation of all artists, in my case, I cannot distinguish totally what is my artistic proposition from the way that as a citizen I feel I have to take part in society. So often my pieces will be, more or less explicitly intervening in or trying to ask questions about subjects that concern me as a citizen also. And often, of course, directing institutions. I've worked as artistic director of the National Theatre in Lisbon for 7 seasons, and now it's been 2 years that I'm working at Festival d'Avignon. I try to interpret, try to have a dialogue between my view as a citizen and my responsibility as a director. And in the case of Festival d'Avignon, we're talking about the festival founded in 1947 with the help of resistance against the Nazi occupation and the collaborationist government, a festival which was defending the values of democracy, progressists, anti-fascists, which means today, of course, anti-racist, feminist, ecologic. So in that sense, with the threats, clear threats during this summer of the extreme right wing, the far right taking government in France, which was a more palpable threat than ever in the recent history of France. The festival took a position and organized and mobilized and answered in real time to the political circumstances. There was a debate around it if we had the right to do it, and I still defend that we were, just respecting and answering to the historical responsibilities of this almost 8-year-old festival. So I think not only we had the right, we were obliged to do it, and that's my institutional interpretation. I didn't shape the festival in order to answer to my personal political concerns. On the contrary, it was a collective decision and mobilization of the festival and many other partners in a moment where silence was not an option. And I'm just glad that I work in a festival where its responsibilities coincide with my concerns and my very broad political view of the world, because I think it's not about this or that ideology. It's about defending values of a democracy where ideologies can dialogue.
Can I ask you, Tiago, maybe just about to pick up that point about how you I think those perspectives and those values are really clear in your own productions, and I think there's this particular moment where you happen to be opening shows at very difficult moments. I was at the premiere of Écoute non écoute in Avignon, where just before we went in to watch the performance, everyone got the terrible news that the far right had topped the poll. And then just recently in New York, you were performing Katerina and the Beauty of Killing Fascists at BAM the week after the presidential election. And I'm just interested in this idea of kind of, on the one hand, those works, you'd made those works already, like you hadn't made them to be premiered at those kind of particular moments of tension. But they were in a way really important works to see at those moments. But also this rapid response idea. How much do you think the theatre can, or festivals can, respond rapidly and have a responsibility to respond rapidly? Or how much do you think the focus maybe should be on the art, and the art will meet its moment when it does?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom. Thank you, because it's something we deal with, especially at Festival d'Avignon, but I dealt with before directing the National Theatre in Lisbon. And there's a huge difference between the reasoning as a theatre or festival director and the reasoning as an artist. That's one of the cases where you really have to take one hat off and to put another one, because I think you answer to different logics. So as an artist, you should do what you feel you should do, I think. If you want to, I work in theater, so I mean, I'm now starting rehearsals in Ghent in Belgium, and if something happens now in the world and I feel the urge, the necessity of changing totally my project to address this issue, I'm free to do it, and theater allows me to do it. So theater allows this sort of immediate answer to things with a more or less solid construction, artistic construction. But you could do that. I'm now working or collaborating with the Lebanese artists that will very probably be present in the next edition of the festival in Avignon, who was working for more than 1 year in a project, and he's in Beirut. And since the bombardments in Lebanon started, he felt he had to totally change the project he was developing. So we've been dialoguing a lot on where that need comes from. Does he feel that he has the time to develop the work? If it doesn't have enough time, because it's someone who works for long periods to research and develop the pieces, if this artist doesn't feel having enough time, is that more important than doing something new, addressing the reality now with the time that is left? So I think as an artist, you can answer to your urge in a more personal way. You're only responsible for your team and for your, what you want to do, and then the people around you that support you, that will present your work or co-produce it, have to, dialogue with that reality. So as an artist, I think you're quite free to do it, and I have done it in the past, but always with some, I think, less immediate than what I could have done. I like to have some, some I wouldn't say historic perspective, but some perspective, some distance in time towards events, to be able to address them somehow. So I do often pieces that are inspired or pushed by current events, or things that I observed or that I witnessed or that I got in touch with. But I like to have, normally a couple of years before that becomes a piece. So I need some digestion. Although when I present the piece, often it might look like it was made for today. But that's theater, right? I mean, Sophocles wrote Antigone 25 centuries ago. And if you present Antigone today in certain parts of the world, it feels it was written for what's happening nowadays and not possible in any other time. That's a very beautiful James Baldwin quote. James Baldwin says that often we think that our suffering is unique in the history of the world, but then we just have to read. The idea that, you know, in repertory, in literature, in theater, in all arts, we will find the things that express our concerns today. And I think that's why we go back to myths. And although I do a lot of, you know, original writing, I'm a lot in touch with repertory and previous works of art, because I feel that often others have written better than we can about our lives today. So being in touch with those narratives, I think, helps us to cross our daily life today and to understand it in not to relativize too much, but to understand it in a broader perspective of the human species. On the other hand, as a director, I think you raise a very interesting question, which is, I think, on one hand, you know, festivals and theaters, we're public service. We're like the political context in which the audience meets the works of arts. We're the social, human, architectural context for this meeting. So the meeting will take place anyway. We know that in humanity. So when there was no democracy, when there was no institutions, when there was no public service, still a few happy ones, maybe rich ones, would have access to the arts. Our mission is that, you know, the access to the arts is as democratic as possible, while creating a context, an architecture, also a, you know, a social and human architecture for this meeting to take place. So I think, of course, we always feel, running a festival, for instance, the need to be open to the world. If our festival is in July and something historical happens in March, of course, we want to dialogue with this critical event that changed also the perspective of the audience, because we know that the audience that will be present at our festival has also this event in mind. So you cannot deny it happened, but you also cannot, on my opinion, force artists to accomplish your mission of being in contact with the world. So I think one of the dangers is that we might, festivals, theaters, wishing to talk about a certain issue, and because often we are the guardians of the, you know, the economy and the tools of production. So that's a dynamic of power that, for instance, in Festival d'Avignon, I might have towards artists I work with, which is they need the money and the means and the space and the technical team and the human resources of the festival in order to do their work. There's a very thin line where my wish to address a certain subject as a festival might force or persuade artists to go and pursue that subject or that type of theme in order to access also the means of production. So I think there is where, you know, the complicity, the transparency, the very close dialogue between curators, programmers, and artists takes place, which is, you know, being able to build programs that are open to the world in dialogue with society, and at the same time respect and promote and fight for the freedom of creation of the artists without forcing them to pursue subjects or forms that are not necessarily what they wish, but they have to treat because that's their way of accessing the means of production. I think this is it's maybe a bit vague, but a very crucial issue today. How not to instrumentalize artists to address a social political agenda while defending that festivals and theaters and other organizations should be in contact with social and political values and with society, and not be in a bubble where programs are not dialoguing with current events.
Can I ask you about maybe one more question, and then I'll let Haris back in, just because I'm fascinated about this dialogue between the curator and the artist. And again, for me, some of the choices that you've made in your Avignon Festival so far have been really kind of strong and clear and inspiring. I think opening your first festival with, on the one hand, Julie Telequet's Welfare, which was a kind of almost naturalistic piece of theatre set in a social welfare office with some of the most marginalized people in society, opening the festival in the Palais de Pape, in this sort of space which used to be the space of the classical theatre, and then closing that festival with Trajan O'Harrell's The Romeo, which was queer and trans people of colour voguing. And so the decision to have those two pieces, those two aesthetics, those two artists to occupy this kind of very charged space. For me, the values of those values were very artistically super interesting, but also socially really strong. And just maybe I'm interested to hear a little bit about how you put a festival together and how you work with artists. How do you make choices? What are the conversations that you have with artists? Just to have some insight into that part of your work.
So at the Festival d'Avignon, I work with two co-directors of programming, Géraldine Chailloux, that works mainly the French or French-speaking program of performances, or work coming from the French-speaking world, and Magda Bizarro that does the rest of the world, the mostly international projects. And so it's a very collegial work. We discuss a lot between us. We have a routine of having time to being permanently on discussion about artists and work, and sharing artists and work. And sometimes in this sharing, some things become productive, in the sense that there's a lot of sharing, which is just like, I saw this piece, I know this artist, etc. And suddenly in the conversation, we start to feel that, maybe these artists could be in the festival. We are a creation festival, so this means that more than 80% of what we present is new work. I usually describe it this way: when someone from the team of Festival d'Avignon goes and see a piece, at the end of the piece, often you have programmers or curators going to the backstage, and when it comes to us, instead of saying, "Oh, I loved your piece, I would like to invite it," normally what we say is, "Oh, I loved your piece, what's your next idea?" So we're really engaged into being with artists, as many other festivals. It's not an exclusive, but we take it as like our mission, not necessarily to show the best of our last months going to theaters and festivals, but of being next to the people that we identified, that we've been dialoguing with, that have a project soon that could work at the festival. So the margin of risk is tremendous, because in April, when we present publicly our program for the month of July, normally when we present, around between 40 and 50 works, we've seen maybe 10 maximum. Most of the other works are either being rehearsed or will be rehearsed still afterwards. So this idea that we're a prototype festival also is what makes the risk, but also the fascination of this, and it creates a context for the dialogue with artists. We're not dialoguing on, "I discovered your last work and I would love to present it." We're dialoguing on, "What are you working on?" So that's immediately a deeper discussion where we take part in a dialogue of an idea that's being developed. And because Avignon takes place in majority in spaces which are quite specific, like palaces, chapels, cloisters, gyms, places which are not in its majority theaters or theater venues. Sometimes that impacts the process of creation of the piece, especially if it will have its premiere in one of these very specific spaces. So this means also that our dialogue has to be very close in the choice of the nice place or the better place for the piece, and sometimes it impacts the piece. Haris mentioned Angelica Lidl in the beginning. When I arrived at Avignon, I immediately talked with Angelica Lidl about, I think, you should do finally a piece for Palais des Papes that would, be a crucial moment in your history with Festival d'Avignon, that it's lasting for more than 20 years, but also our history, because I've been presenting her work in Portugal for quite some time, and being close to her work for more than 20 years. So she started to develop an idea for Palais des Papes, for this space. And of course, knowing that later it would have to be adapted to other spaces, but I think the space there and the fact that it was this, monument with all its history and its bloody history also, its Pope's history, religious history, historical, history. I'm sorry for the redundancy. I will translate it in Latin and do a tattoo, historical history, but also the theatrical history of this place, which is very present in her piece. So, this is a very exceptional example of a dialogue that, went very far in the way that the festival ended up influencing the development of Angelica's work, but in other cases, it's different types of concerns. But so we're very close to the production moment, to the invention of the piece. And then we start to realize each year at a certain point, like now, for instance, for next year, we start to recognize there are common threads, there are, invisible lines connecting the program that we didn't look for. So we don't go after a subject matter that unites the program or something like that. But we have, some structure. For instance, every year we invite a language. Inviting a language doesn't force artists to treat a certain subject, but it forces us to travel to countries and regions of the world where this language is spoken and try to discover or solidify dialogues with artists from these regions. And also the idea that from the festival we look at the world not divided in borders or nationalities, but connected by the complexity of languages. So that's a line of work. And then there are lines that start to emerge because we see that this project has this in common with this one and then with this one. And we start to see that there are, that there's a sort of spirit of the performance or identity or personality of the performance of the program that starts to emerge. But it's like a sort of wild garden. We sort of take care of it, but not too much. And then suddenly we start to realize that some plants resemble, or some flowers have the same color, or some scents sort of mix well. And that allows us also to organize a bit the festival and then have all the 300 debates, screen projections, concerts, etc. All the other events around it are inspired by what we identify in this program. And this is what we're doing now. So we have the performance program ready. And now we start to identify, oh, this subject and this subject and this subject, we should invite this philosopher to come and talk because it connects to all this. So now we're creating all the satellites program around the 40-something performances that we will present to the audience next summer.
Thank you.
So, Tiago, you said previously that there are points when we cannot be silent about the things that we shouldn't be silent about. Talking about the opening of the Avignon Festival last edition. But when we say artists, you know, we often actually we somehow indicate that it's like a united world. But the artistic world was never united. You know, it's very diverse. We have different artists, from those who are brave, who are at the barricades, to those who collaborate with the Nazis, you know, to those who from Coco Chanel and Gustav Gründgens to Leni Riefenstahl, to many other people, you know, who actually employed their talents, their knowledge, their impact to the audience, you know, to the evil causes, or simply to their conformistic positions, or to their lack of freedom or lack of courage, and so on. I think something similar may be said also for the festival directors. We are not as, at the same time, we are not as fragile as sometimes we like to present ourselves as the artists, you know. Oh, we are the artists, we should be protected, we should have endless freedom of speech, and so on and so on. When you say you don't want to pursue certain artists to do something, I understand it. But at the same time, as an artist, I love sometimes to be pursued. I love sometimes to have leadership, you know, that somehow directs me a little bit, of course, not instrumentalize, but to push a little bit, to go over my limits, you know. So in the world that I'm sorry to go back to this, but it is really worrying, you know, that we have extreme rise of extreme right in Europe and the United States. And that we know from the history that never goes well when we have this kind of extreme right being more and more in the positions of decision making. We also have kind of hesitation in the artistic world about what's going on. Everywhere in Europe, you know, I don't want to elaborate, but you know, we can recognize what I'm talking about. When you say collective imagination, which I also share, share your opinion that it's important, it's most important at this moment in the artistic world and cultural world in Europe. When you say not to be silent for the things that we shouldn't be silent about, how to act in the world when there are so many pressures, political, social, conformistic, personal cowardice, how to encourage this collective imagination?
Thank you, Haris. We enter a very complex area, which is I should say that a part of what I'm going to say is our personal convictions that I don't think that we all have to share, but you know, it's the way I see the world. And once it's me speaking to you, I totally respect other visions of how to do it when you're directing a festival or a theater, or when you're an artist. And that's for me the basic thing, is that my convictions or the way I speak out sometimes, or I position a festival or a performance, are not in favor of my political views. They're in favor of the possibility of having a debate. And that's what I think that the extreme far right and its threats and polarized fake news, demagogical, populistic media and politics forbid to have a conversation. To have a conversation where actually disagreeing is a treasure, is a richness, makes us better. Two people that disagree make up for a third idea, which is better than the two ideas they disagree about. So this possibility. So I have my ideas, but my first idea is that I want to have conversations with people that think differently from me. So when I look at Festival d'Avignon, that's the whole thing. Jean Villard didn't want to do a festival for left-wing resistance against fascism. He wanted to do a festival for, in 1947, when he founded the festival, for a society that was divided and had to have moments where they could be together and produce critical thinking, where they would say that disagreeing was interesting. So when I think of Festival d'Avignon, I don't think of Festival d'Avignon for a like-minded audience. I think for the public, which is a diversity of publics. It's the people, actually, which is a diversity of ways of thinking. I'm very happy that extreme right-wing voters come to Festival d'Avignon, as long as they don't have, which is already happened recently, expressions of racism or despise or sexism during the festival. And when that is the case, that becomes a different kind of debate. But when the debate is about how could we, how can we look at the world in this sort of enchanted between brackets, which is a festival. It's like, let's take a pause and just cross this sort of plunge into this sea of 1,000 ideas per day, too much food. We will be digesting these ideas during the entire year, but that's the role of a festival. It's a party. It's supposed to be too much. So it's a summer party. That's the etymology of the word. Fête estival, festa estival. It comes from the Latin party and summer. So a festival is about like a summer party. It's too much, and then you get out of it, and you have to, it's like a celebration of ideas and of arts, and then you have the rest of the year to deal with that calmly as possible. So I think that's a basic thing when I think about not being able to be silent. I think, for instance, of artists that will come this year to Festival d'Avignon. They know they will be coming to a festival that refuses the possibility of dialoguing with the far right institutionally, but is okay with receiving spectators that have voted far right. Because they have their legitimate presence there, but we do not discuss with the far right party, for instance. I do not accept meetings with far right deputies, and there are plenty of elected far right people in the region of the south of France where Avignon is taking place. So in that sense, artists know where they are. Because we took a stance and we spoke out. When you as an artist need to be, in contact with how you position yourself, it's nice to know what's the position of the festival that you're presenting your work or not presenting your work. And you can choose not to go to this sort of festival that spoke out and has a political view on the world. But that's our basis, because we think that we have to speak out, because otherwise we could take an ambiguous position, which is contrary to democracy, and we defend values. I mean, institutions defend values. I'm sorry, a hospital defends values. That's why in hospital, people cannot be mistreated, and that's considered an even worse crime than being aggressed outside a hospital. A hospital is about taking care. So in a hospital, there are values. It's political. A hospital is also political. If it was not political, it wouldn't exist. The rich would have health and the poor would have no health care. So a hospital is political, like a festival, like a theater, like a courthouse, so that these are political inventions. I'm so sorry to announce that. So I'm okay with finding political in every institution, in every choice of an institution. And I really have a problem with institutions that say, no, we don't do politics, because the only reason they exist in the arts, in the culture, or other fields of activity, if they're an institution, even if they're not a state public institution, a private institution, also political, it stands for values, maybe just for profit, but that's a value. I think that's one thing. On the other hand, I think often we're threatened, and I can't help myself of watching the box and some comments in the box. And there's something I would like to say about how sometimes we're characterized in the arts and culture because we feel powerless sometimes. facing the world. But we're not alone. We should not ask of culture or the arts or theater more than what it can do. It's like education. Sometimes we tend to say like, oh, the solution of this problem in society, it's in school. We have to go back to school and address better the issue, for instance, of discrimination, of racism, for instance. That's in school. Yes, it is also in school, but you can't ask too much of school. You can't ask school to solve the world. Schools will not solve the world. They will contribute. And I think the arts or the arts and culture institutions and events and organizations and public service of culture can also contribute, but we cannot expect that the theater play stops the far right of winning elections. I had this conversation in New York. You should not expect that. But if there are 1,000 theater plays and 4,000 concerts, maybe you can expect a bit more, but still not stopping the far right of taking power. But then if there's like 1 million school classes, and there's, so you do your contribution and you manage frustration, as it's been like for centuries, that one piece of art or even 1,000 pieces of art, however engaged they are in humanity and human values, are not sufficient to do the political work that changes society for the best. They might do a contribution or they might be useless. I remind you that in Munich, while trains took an entire people to concentration camps, they at some hundreds of meters of the train station, they played the most beautiful Bach. So culture and arts are not the antidote to barbaric, horrific things happening, but they're also not the reason for it to happen. And they might be organized in a context where they're shared with an audience in a way that it might work for the better in society. We have in Avignon a project which is called First Time. It's our obsession and passion of having audiences that come for the first time to the festival. More than 50% of our audience every year is coming for the first time. More than a third are less than 30 years old. Although in between the first times, we also have people from all ages, not only young people, but young people are the majority. And the idea that, a festival spends time and money and efforts in guaranteeing that there's space and place and context and being accompanied, being taken, being helped in the awkward situation of not having the codes, because I've been also a 14-year-old that felt he didn't belong in the theater venue because he didn't understand if he could get in with sneakers or tennis shoes or not. So I've been that person, so I understand what it is to be a teenager and feeling you don't belong, it's not for you. And it's still an issue, 30 years later or 40 years later, it's still an issue in society, the belonging. But I would like to remind people that sometimes we do a little self-punishing of, we always work for the same people. It's always the same audience, enlightened people. We work in a bubble. Actually, we're not really in contact with society. And I have a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends in the arts that often say that. And I understand that comes from a place of self-criticism, which is essential for us. But I also remind you, never in the history of humanity the arts and culture were so accessible to so many people. Never before today, so many different people with education or not, with money or not, with this or that color of skin, accessed culture and the arts all over the world. Never before arts and culture were so accessible. So I refuse the premise of arts and culture are for a few lucky ones. That's an extreme right-wing, far-right fascist premise, which I do not accept, because facts matter and facts say the contrary. Never before the arts and culture were so democratically accessible. So that's what we also have to defend. We have to defend what we conquered already. And we're lousy. Democrats, we are lousy at defending our victories. We have
as we saw it most recently everywhere in the world, including United States. I'm using your license to interrupt you because
yes, please. I was on a run. Next 5 minutes, I would do political campaign.
We are coming to the end of timing for this meeting, and I see lots of interest. And I'm sure that there will be people who would love to ask the question or comment on this. So I would like at this point, if Tom, if you agree, to open this, for the participants and to use the following 10 minutes, to give the opportunity to the participants to ask the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I might just pull together a few things from the chat. And Tiago, I think you've answered the comments that are coming in the chat really well. If anyone would like to come on screen and ask a question or make a point, just please use the raise hand or put a comment in the chat. But I think that there's been a discussion here about how to establish more self-criticism and get out of the power frame that we're in. And I think there's a useful question here from Stephanie, which is, are the other players in our societies equipped for this kind of dialogue? And who do we need to cooperate with outside the arts in our societies and in our festival makings, to achieve what you're talking about, and to ensure that there is the most access to what we're doing? Who do we need to cooperate with? How do we establish more self-criticism?
Well, I think in many cases, many of the people who are in this Zoom will say, yeah, but that we're doing already, but we have to keep on doing it. I think we have to cooperate with the education system. We have to cooperate with associations, because these are the most combative expressions of civil society, people who come together and around the subject and try to work on it on their free time to address an issue. Associations, or societies, but this is sort of a cooperative movement. Of course, I would say every institution that works in the social or medical, clinical health field, I think we're part. Culture and the arts are part of this, public services that are clearly non-profit, and this has to be said. It has to be said. I mean, what we provide to society should not have produce the richness that pays back the public investment, just like health and education. The value of what is shared with society is not measurable by the box office or the sponsorship or the however the economy of a festival or a theater or a cultural institution is organized. So we're non-profits that produce value for society. In that sense, I mean, associating ourselves with all organizations that believe that the most important things in society are invisible and non-measurable, like values, like comfort, like freedoms, like rights. And then, of course, university is very important, because I think we are at a place of research also, and the research and the knowledge produced by research is in clear contact with what the arts are doing, or the public service of arts is doing, because of course there are arts and culture that can produce profit, that can survive in the laws of the market, but that's not the reason why public service organizations of culture exist. They exist to guarantee that the freedom of speech and the diversity of aesthetics is accessible to the largest number, especially those who would not survive in the rules of the market. I have nothing against artists that can work in systems that produce profits and don't need public financing. Great for them. But I think public financing of cultural and artistic institutions or organizations exists so that the aesthetics, unvaluable aesthetics. Let's not forget that Van Gogh didn't sell a single painting during his life, but this unvaluable aesthetics and thoughts produced by the arts that cannot survive in the markets are still being produced and accessible to the largest number. So in that sense, I think if you envisage yourself as part of a public service, very quickly you understand with which kind of organizations you can cooperate in society. And I think the most diverse type of organizations and the broadest number of organizations depending in how you operate. And of course, connecting with local, where you are. Festival d'Avignon might be a world-known festival, but in between are around 300 partners that we work with throughout the year. The huge majority, more than 200, are based in the territory where we're based in the Avignon area. So we work a lot. We work with more than 100 schools in the region around Avignon, with very small villages also, where audiences are even if they're at 3 kilometers from Avignon, they feel far from the festival mentally. So in that sense, I think working there where you can make the most difference, and each organization understands what I'm talking about. When you know your context, you know where you would make most difference. And that's I think a name for all cultural organizations, and also so that when culture and the arts are threatened, which is something that happens cyclically, you have a civil society assembly around you. And that's what we felt this summer in Avignon when we tried to mobilize. We had school teachers, we had nurses coming to Palais des Papes and speaking out against the far right next to us. It was not only cultural or artistic figures taking the stage to speak out and intervene. So in that sense, I think belonging to the ensemble of society and working for the best is of course one of the missions, while balancing that with assuring the maximum of freedom of speech and creation to artists.
We've got 2 minutes left, and Tiago, it would be great if you could just give us something to look forward to. What are you working on now, and is there something you can tell us about Avignon next summer that we can look forward to?
Well, in Avignon, the opening of the festival at Palais des Papes, the opening show will be a new piece by Marlene Monteiro Freitas, Cape Verdean choreographer based in Portugal, but touring all over the world with her work. And she will be creating a collective dance piece based upon the 1001 Nights. So with this connection with the Arabic language, which is the invited language this year to the festival. So we will have artists coming from many Arab-speaking countries: Morocco, Tunisia, Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, and other several countries. Which I mean, I'm not going to do the whole list, but there's a lot of artists coming from several Arab-speaking countries, but also from France, where Arabic is spoken by 3 million people, and it's the second language of the country after French. So that there's also a national importance for this choice of the Arabic language. There's also every year we do a miniature piece, which is an amazing, huge, very small piece that we ask an artist to create, that tours in villages in very small places. And this year it will be the funniest piece in the world, which is the title of the piece by Milo Rau, which is his take on an idea of popular theater théâtre populaire as Jean Villard dreamed it and did it for Avignon. So this is a production of Festival d'Avignon that will tour in very small villages around and the suburban areas of Avignon. And there's 40 something pieces and 300 more events, and the festival will take place from the 5th to the 26th of July. And before that, I'm here now in Ghent, in Belgium, starting the rehearsals of my next piece, which will not be presented at Festival d'Avignon. It's the 6th chapter of a series that Ente Ghent has developed, which is Histoire du Théâtre, which was made already by Milo Rau, Angelica Lidl, Faustin Ligné-Kula, Tim Matchells, and Mick Varlop. And I'm doing the 6th episode. It's pieces where you try to, address your idea of theater, but also just do a piece. And in this case, the starting point is a personal story. So when my father, who was a journalist for more than 40 years, was already very sick with a terminal disease in hospital, he decided to write his last article, reportage, for the newspaper, and he wanted to write it about dying in hospital. So he asked me to bring a notebook, and I brought him a notebook. And during his last weeks in hospital, he was always writing in his notebook, and it was supposed to be his last article. And when he died, I got the notebook back in this sort of black plastic bag with all these belongings, and inside the notebook there was nothing. There was just, he could not write anymore. He was too sick, too weak, and so there was just lines that you can't really understand. And there was a title which was No Yogurt for the Dead. I knew where the title was coming from because he had fallen in love with yogurts in the hospital. He had always hated yogurts all his life, but now that he was in hospital, he loved yogurts. And there was this title written already, with a lot of difficulty, and then pages and pages of scribbles that you can't read. So I decided to do a piece where I imagine what he wanted to write. So it's a piece in the form of his last article. And this is what we're starting to rehearse now, and opens the 23rd of January in Ghent.
Tiago,
Thank you
thank you so much for this most inspiring and a rare opportunity to hear from you this detailed and focused and clear account of on your work, both as a festival director, as an artist. And there is actually, I don't know how much you can follow, but in the box, it's a standing ovation by the participants. And thank you for, as Emily Dickinson would put it this morning, excellent and fair.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you. I would love that we would have like 4 hours to do it, but we'll surely meet in festivals and theaters throughout the world the next months, and if not before, I wait for your visit in Avignon.
Thank you
Thanks so
very
much.
much, Tiago, for this.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Haris. Thank you, Tom, allowing this insight into your work. Haris, thank you, Tom. I didn't have the chance to introduce you properly. I jumped immediately on Tiago's introduction, but also to you, Haris and Tom, thank you very much. It's interesting to have this triangle of people talking to each other and following the parallel chat, because it's the triangle of an artist, of a citizen, and of a festival director that the three of you somehow are sharing with each other in completely different kinds of contexts. But this conversation was truly inspiring, Tiago. Thank you for allowing us into your thinking, into your thoughts, and always contextualizing your thoughts in a broader framework, that not your thoughts are everybody else's thoughts. And I think that's the idea of the artist's words, that we are allowing this conversation to trigger new thinking in our own heads. And I'm sure, seeing the chat, and not even those things that are put into the chat, that many of us have enjoyed the development of new perspectives and thoughts in our own minds. I can only say at the very end that this conversation, Artist's Words, is part of a series of conversations we have started some time ago, and we would like to develop in the next months. It's part of what is called the 70 Years On Conversations. Tiago Ifa is an old lady as well, such as the Avignon Festival. We are 73 years old of existence, and we are going to meet back as a community live in Edinburgh, one of your sister festivals that also counts a couple of decades, from the 27th until the 30th of April. And I would like to invite everybody in this room to note down these dates in your calendars and save these dates. I would like to invite you, of course, Tiago, to be with us if time allows, but it's, of course, heavy preparation, probably of your own productions and preparation of the festival. But the invitation is heartfelt in your direction, and it would be great to have you in our context, but otherwise, indeed, in the frame of festivals across Europe, in the theater halls, as you said.